also the tightening of the monetary policy by the CBN and the Monetary Policy Committee. Looking at that number now, I can't remember what figure it is currently. The interest rate.
So central banks always have to align what they call inflation to interest rate to inflation. They call it an interest rate to inflation yield curve, or they call it the convexity of the fixed income market, the correlation between the prices of bonds and central bank inflation or monetary policy tightening and inflation. So what happens typically is that if inflation continues up, the central bank has to engage in monetary policy tightening through the MPC, Monetary Policy Committee, to align that curve. And the more it aligns that curve and it sends it up so that investors will not have a negative return on yield on their money, the more the coupon on the bonds go up, the yields, right? And the more the yields go up, the more expensive it becomes for the government to service its debt, its existing debt, which is the reason why in the 2023 Appropriation Act, you can see very well that 6.5 trillion naira of that budget, 6.5 trillion of 21.8 trillion, is going into what they call the sinking fund. The sinking fund is like the monies the government is using for debt service and debt refinancing. Debt service is interest on principal. Refinancing is like, okay, I owe you 5 million. I am due to pay you the principal by 30th of May 2023. I don't have the principal, but I'm willing to refinance my debt. Okay? So you're giving me, as a creditor, you're giving me an interest rate at which I'm willing to refinance. If I'm not willing to pay the principal back as obligated in the contract, I should pay an interest. The interest might be 5% of 5 million or 10% of 5 million. If the interest is 5%, it's 250,000. So you're giving me the option of refinancing it. So that's 6.5 trillion in sinking fund. Basically,
so this is to say that I'm pushing forward.
You're pushing forward the payment of the principal, which is what the government is doing.
Now, look at this. The NBC says in the last quarter or so, Nigeria spent 96% of its revenue.
I'm even surprised it's not. I'm even surprised because it used to be 119%.
So we had to borrow to finance debt. Is that what we do?
Yes, we borrow to refinance and service debt. We also borrow to pay PMS subsidy, which is against the Fiscal Responsibility Act sections 41, sections 22 of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007, that says all loans must be used only, primarily, for two things. Number one, and most importantly, capital expenditure projects and human capacity development. It's in the Fiscal Responsibility Act.
Now, I'm going to let's hold that there because speaking of subsidy, the federal government says just for the removal of subsidy to cushion the effects of the removal of subsidy, it's borrowing $800 million, which is going to be used to that's going to be disbursed to indigent Nigerians, the poorest of the poor, as they call them. And many Nigerians are wondering why we have to borrow money to disburse to people, cash transfers and all that stuff that we're doing. Why not use the monies to build infrastructure that would ease transportation, for instance, if we're removing subsidy?
Well, this is a question I'm joining.
So are we saying that the government has continued to break the law, the Finance Act, consistently, and even breaking it even while leaving office?
Yes, it has. Yeah, I mean, President Buhari's administration has not had the reputation for obeying the Constitution. Based on the antecedents over the last 8 years, I'm not surprised that they're continuing it while leaving office. The $800 million from the World Bank, I'd like to explain the structure of that loan so that our audience has a perspective. Because the federal government had said that it was a grant, and it's not a grant. If you see the loan agreement document that was signed specifically on the 16th of August 2022, between the International Development Association, the World Bank is divided into two. You have what they call the IBRD, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Then you have the International Development Association that lends money to middle-income countries and low-income countries, okay? Especially low-income countries. So the idea wants to give Nigeria like palliative money, which is what Nigeria requested for. like to ameliorate the impact of removing subsidy under recovery, which takes about 31% of the budget for 2023. Because petrol prices are going to rise up to somewhere around 580, 600, and somewhere around 750 naira per liter, right? From June, when subsidy is removed, because the PIA says that 18 months after it comes into law, federal government is obligated to remove petrol subsidy. Okay, so the World Bank says Nigeria has to provide the collateral for them to give them loan. So the Ministry of Finance went to the IMF and withdrew what they call the special drawing rights. It's like a reserve that is allocated to countries. Nigeria has about 30.3 billion units, which is worth at about 4.2 or 4.3 billion US dollars in value. Nigeria withdrew 17% of its special drawing rights, 17.1%, and used as a collateral to stake at the World Bank to withdraw $800 million. That is attracting 1.6% interest per annum. It's a low interest loan because it's a development finance institution. Okay, and that has a 4-year moratorium, which means that Nigerian government will not start paying interest on the loan until 2027. Okay, per annum. And this, the government says, is going to use to provide 7,000 to 10,000 naira conditional cash transfer on a yearly basis. So to the lowest income people,
about 50 million
10 million
Nigerians.
people, 10 million families,
Households,
the
yes.
social register. The question I have for the government, and I've continued to ask the government, is number one, over 2 trillion naira has been disbursed for social investment programs, GIP, Empower, conditional cash transfer, homeschool feeding programs. Are there metrics to measure impact, performance, monitoring, and performance evaluation? It's a major part of management, right? How do you measure impact? Can you point me to one economic indicator, per capita income, poverty rate, hunger rates, that shows unemployment rate, that shows that these social investment programs has actually impacted Nigerians? The answer is no. In fact, Nigerians have gotten poorer. Per capita income of Nigerians have dropped about 49% in the last 8 years. Unemployment went from 9%. It's currently about 37.7%. KPMG expects it to go to 40.6% by the turn of the year. So if the economy is getting worse and you're actually giving out trillions of naira in social investment programs, how do you justify borrowing $800 million from the World Bank to add to an already huge debt burden to subsidize the poor when you remove petroleum subsidy?
That's a serious question there. I hope that someone was able to answer that question, because as it is, we're looking at 40 days before the end of this administration, and some of the headlines this morning says, "Oh, we're doing more projects, and we may need to borrow money to finance this project." Let's also look at the fact that China Exim Bank rejected a loan from Nigeria at some point, and currently we're still struggling, to get projects off the ground. Even, do you think that the next administration would be able to carry on this project, running into billions, in fact about $1 trillion naira worth of projects that this administration has signed on, in 40 days before it leaves office? Do you think that the next administration will be able to carry on all of this?
The question is, how do you finance the project? Because your capex, 96% of your capex is used to service debt. You have 4% remaining. How do you finance the project? In the 2023 Appropriation Act, the government says it's going to borrow 7.5 trillion to cover deficits in the budget, deficit financing. What are the sources for raising that money? The number one source they usually use to borrow is the Eurobonds market. Okay, in the Eurobonds market, Nigeria has a junk status credit rating as CA1. It's not prime; it's the lowest level of investment grade. Junk is called junk. The coupons on that is simply unbelievable. like 4 years ago, Nigeria was borrowing at 4-5% per annum. Today, Nigeria is borrowing at somewhere around 18-19% per annum. For a government, that is unbelievable. Can you imagine World Bank giving you a loan for 1.65% as a DFI, and then you are borrowing from the Eurobonds market from institutions in Europe and the North America at 18-19%. They are not even willing to touch your bond, number one. The other avenues are the treasury bills, open money market operations. Then you have bilateral loans, which was what China rejected in the rolling plan from the MTF of 2018. A rolling debt plan, China Exim Bank, they rejected it. They rejected it because China sees the fiscal position of the Nigerian economy and know that giving the Nigerian government more money is not sustainable. Okay? So where do you run to for loans? China, Japan, Germany, the US? Where do you run to for loans? Are they willing to loan you money? If you're not willing to loan you money, you can't get money from the Eurobonds market. Ways and Means is a no-go because there is currently a bill sitting before the National Assembly asking for the Senate to approve securitization of 23.7 trillion naira in Ways and Means that was borrowed from the central bank. That they want to convert into a 40-year government bond that Nigerians will have to pay for at 9% per annum with a 3-year moratorium. Which means that loan will not start actually paying coupon on a yearly basis until 2026. How do you borrow more money from the central bank, knowing that there's a correlation between quantitative easing, central bank printing money out of thin air it doesn't have, that is not backed by reserves, and currency devaluation and depreciation? So where do you raise the money from? That's the question that the next government has to ask itself, because it's really, really precarious. And it's unbelievable that, like in 2011, yes, when Fitch first profiled Nigeria, rated Nigeria in its sovereign rating, I think at B2 or B3, I've forgotten, is it B? So, no, I think B minus or BA3. We've dropped like 4 or 5 steps down to CAA1. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that Nigeria was attracting FDIs of between 8 and 11-12 billion dollars, and now Nigeria is attracting less than $1 billion, when Tanzania is attracting up to $1.7 billion per quarter. Tanzania in East Africa.
$1.7 billion per quarter.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Where else do we go? Let's look at the oil sector for instance for a bit. We touched on that, but let's look at more at that. In the National Assembly, there's a probe for a $2.4 billion, missing crude oil and all. And just yesterday, the National Assembly says it seems like the Attorney General and the Minister of Finance are frustrating their probe. There's oil theft that's going on. People are currently asking who are the beneficial owners of the oil companies, especially the subsidiaries of the NNPC, in the upstream and midstream sector. What is going on in a situation where NNPC as a private firm isn't even remitting, or Saudi Aramco disclosed the 160 or so billion profit last year, was it 2022? The NNPCL has been in the light, and what Nigerians are looking at to see what is the change since the transition to into a limited company, liability company. What has been the difference? What is the significant difference that we've seen since this transition happened? In your estimation, do you think there's any positive that's coming out of that? Is there any growth that you've seen in that sector in the last year?
I am an NNPC skeptic. I've not seen any visible progress, because people saying to you that you should celebrate a $1.5 billion profit is ridiculous. And the reason it's ridiculous is because Saudi Aramco did $153 billion last year. NNPC has 4 dead moribund refineries that is gulping about 100 billion naira per year in pension and administrative expenses. The question I have for NNPC is, why do you have 4 dead refineries not refining any liter of PMS, AGO, aviation fuel, right? Or the dual purpose kerosene, DPK, and you're spending 100 billion naira? Does it make sense? If it were a company, investors will sue. Investors will sue the board, the management of the company, because you can't have spending money, the money of your investors, when you're not generating any revenue, right? So how do you explain that NNPC is doing $1.5 billion when their mates are doing $153 billion US dollars? The excuse I keep getting anytime I ask this question is, the reason is because Saudi Aramco is involved. It doesn't do joint venture agreements with international oil companies. He does his own exploration and production. And the answer is, that's not an excuse. Okay, so in my perspective, in my opinion, I think it's time for the government and the next government to consider, now NNPC is a limited liability company. When the board and management bring experienced administrators and people who have cognate experience in oil and gas, the management and non-executive board, and audit NNPC, then take NNPC, get investment bankers, do book building, and take NNPC for IPO, in an initial public offering, sell a portion of the shares, 10, 15, 20%, raise capital to fund gas projects, raise capital to do JV, joint venture, to build refineries in Nigeria. Nigeria needs more refineries so that you can raise supply above demand, because Nigeria needs anywhere around 35 to 40 million liters of PMS on a daily basis. Okay, you can raise, and 43% of every barrel of crude oil gives you about 179 liters of derivatives. Of that, 43% of 179 liters is PMS. So if you're refining in Lagos, you have 100% capacity utilization, and you're refining about 650,000 barrels, you're going to get anywhere around maybe 51 million liters of PMS on a daily basis. Okay, so if you can raise the supply to maybe 75 or 100 million liters of PMS, you can basically depress price and export the balance to raise money for the economy, which is what Saudi Arabia does very well. Saudi Arabia has Motiva refinery in Texas, that is one of the largest refineries in the US, doing about 600,000 barrels of crude oil on a daily basis. You see, you can't export raw materials and expect to be profitable, to be prosperous. The way you create prosperity is to, mine and process what you mined into derivatives. That's where the value is. Everything from, in fact, even the asphalt and bitumen binders used from road construction comes from crude oil. Okay, Nigeria imports it. So how does it make sense, for example, that in 2022 Nigeria spent about 350 billion naira importing asphalt for road construction, right? And then you have crude oil that actually produces asphalt, and you're importing asphalt. Everything from pet coke used in making plastics for containers and cans for your canned drinks, to diesel, to aviation fuel, to DPK, dual purpose kerosene, to premium motor spirit, comes from crude oil. Yeah, to marine oil. There are so many derivatives. There are about maybe 9 or 11 derivatives. Nigerians only know PMS and diesel and kerosene. There are about 9 or 11 different. So if you process what you refine, you make more money for the shareholders. And if the Nigerian government is the majority shareholder in NNPC. So this is my response to NNPC saying that, this is our performance. It's abysmal. It's ridiculous.
We'll talk about what people have described NNPC as a cesspit of corruption and all that. We'll be looking at some, but then let's talk about the president, the vice president's energy transition plan, and the fact that Nigeria has large deposits of lithium for the production of EMVs and batteries and all that. The world is in high demand. There's a high demand for all that. Now, should that be where the next administration should be looking to since people are saying in the next few years we may not be able to deal dirty crude or oil as much as we are currently doing. What's the next big thing for the Nigerian market? Would it be lithium? Would it be our human resources or human capital? What area should we be looking at in the next few years, especially considering the fact that at this point oil isn't doing so well? We have a huge debt burden. We may not be able to make and generate more money, enough money to finance and run the economy. We'll be talking about that. Stay with us shortly. We'll come back and continue the conversation. My guest this morning again is Emmanuel Kelvin, who is the CEO, Dairy Hill. He's given us insight as to, what it is that we're dealing with as an economy. Stay with us.
Eagles 102.3 Abuja.
The Eagles FM Abuja Quiz Show for SS1 to SS3 is here. Enroll your school today with 2 students participating in maths, English, and general knowledge and get massive promotion as long as your school remains in the competition, plus other prizes for the winning school. Registration is 20,000 naira per school and closes on the 12th of April 2023. Quiz starts on Saturday 15 April 2023 and will be transmitted live on YouTube and Facebook. For sponsorship and partnership, please call 081 330 98542. That is 081 330 98542. The Eagles FM Abuja Quiz Show, building future champions today.
Betway is your gateway to an entire theme park of gaming excitement. A whirlpool of wonder where your favorite games come to life. From Hot Fruit to Dream Catcher, from Gonzo's Quest to Aviator, where you can take the skies across a world of possibility, all from the palm of your hand. Sign up today at betway.com.ng. Terms and conditions apply. No under 18. Bet responsibly.
Eagles 102.3 Abuja.
Good to have you stay with us on your radio experience you can count on. And we've been talking about Nigeria's economic position as it is and the trajectory, especially as we are drawing closer to transition date for the new government to take over the reins of power. My guest has been Kelvin Emmanuel doing an Economy 101 session with us this morning. We're understanding some of the intrigues and some of the things playing out with the Nigerian economy. And before we took that pause, I was saying, where do we look at now? Would it be, gas? Many people have said Nigeria has a huge deposit of gas. Last I saw, about 600 trillion cubic feet of gas reserves and all, and there's a 250 billion naira set aside for conversion of cars. Speaking of subsidy removal and the way to go for the economy, should we be looking at gas as the next big thing for the Nigerian economy? Also let me throw in the fact that we had the Trans Morocco and the Trans, before now it was Algeria gas pipeline. We're supposed to say, we're going to provide gas for Europe and even the Americas. But that project, where are we with that? The AKK gas pipeline, where are we with that? I saw a story yesterday where said that some of the partners are dropping the contract because there's a 570% inflation on the rate. I'm wondering, how did we get to that point? 570% inflation on the rates.
Okay. Before I respond to your questions, I'm going to give a background context so that I guess to understand what gas is and where we are, and why we're not moving as quickly as other countries are moving in, considering that the Russia-Ukraine war actually impacted heavily on the gas prices globally. And there's suddenly been an increase in demand for gas because Russian gas was taking off most of in the European and some parts of Southeast Asia market. The only countries Russia supplies gas now is China and India mostly, and a few other countries, compared to the fact that Russia was making somewhere around $450 million per day piping gas to Europe. So you have what they call associated gas, and then you have condensates. Associated gas is basically like gas gotten off from the well heads when you drill for crude oil. Okay? The gas that is trapped is called associated gas, that comes through flow stations, from feeder lines or flow stations into what they call a gas gathering infrastructure, a manifold, from where you have transmission lines, like you have the OBEN, OB3, you have the export line from Eskrawa, Turkey line that leads all the way to Ghana, that supplies Ghana with a major part of the gases used to generate electricity. Then you have lines like what is supposed to be the Ajaokuta, Abuja, Kaduna, Kano line, which is about AKK, which is about 614 kilometers. So those are transmission lines. When it gets to a city gate, what they call the city gate, you now have what they call distribution lines that leads to commercial factories. It's depressurized, so it leads to commercial factories, it leads to public work infrastructure, generators, independent power plants, and power generating companies. Those are distribution lines. The problem with gas, number one, is for the internal lines, not for the export lines, because the internal export lines are priced based on international pricing standards in USD. The internal lines that runs within Nigeria, that's less than 1,000 kilometers, is priced in Naira. Gas prices are regulated by the Nigerian Gas Management Company, NGMC. Nigerian Gas Company was restructured after the PIA into the Nigerian Gas Management Company and the Nigerian Gas Infrastructure Company. So NGMC is responsible for pricing and administration. NGIC, Nigerian Gas Infrastructure Company, is responsible for the piping. Okay? Nigeria needs about 5,000 kilometers of piping infrastructure, which is the reason why AKK was being built. Globally, the price of building 1 kilometer of gas pipe is somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million per kilometer. Per kilometer.
800,000
and $1 million per kilometer. So, how do you explain budgeting $2.8 billion in what they call final investment decision for engineering that mostly has to do with designs, procurement, that has to do with the supply chain, getting the materials for and then construction, EPC? How do you explain allocating $2.8 billion and asking the Infrastructure and Commercial Bank of China, ICBC, and Sinocho, China Export Protecting Agency, to finance the project? China is well versed with building gas pipes around the world, especially in China. In fact, China and Russia combined built a pipe from Russia all the way to China. The pipe, what they call it the Siberia 2 gas pipe that connects from Russia to China. How do you explain to the Chinese that for a project that costs them about $800, no more than $1 million per kilometer, you are budgeting $4.5 million per kilometer? How do you explain to them? It doesn't make any sense. So the Chinese pulled out of the project, and the project is stalled because of lack of funding, which is the reason why the Minister of Works had come out in the last couple of days, explained that Buhari's government will not be able to inaugurate the project before it leaves on the 29th of May.
And they were supposed to provide about 75% of the
85%.
85%. And now they're dropping out.
They've dropped out.
Is that to mean that would mean that project is dead?
I don't
at the moment?
I'm not sure it is dead, because First of all, the Ajaokuta to Abuja leg is done. Now, the Ajaokuta to Abuja leg is like 31 to 32% of the project. So it means that the Abuja to Kaduna and the Kaduna to Kano leg, which is somewhere around 68 or 69% of the project, is stalled. Can you say that a project that is 31% completed is completed? And for a project that lacks financing for 68% or 69% of it is completed? I'll allow Nigerians to make their own conclusions and deductions. You know, and gas is important because gas is an alternative to diesel.
Now, I was just going to come to the fact that the Buhari administration has recently signed, the constitutional reform review that allows for states to generate power. Wouldn't this have been an opportunity for states to be able to, pipe gas to a point where they can generate their own electricity using gas, and also make electricity available and cheaper in the states?
What are the ways through which you can generate electricity? Hydro, right? Hydro is seasonal because of the rainy and dry seasons in Nigeria. Nigeria is what's it called? A tropical country. It's not a temperate country. It has two seasons, rainy and dry seasons. In other parts of the world, you have spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Okay? You have renewable source of energy like wind, solar. Okay? You have gas that most of the gencos use to generate electricity. If you don't have adequate piping infrastructure to feed them through transmission lines where they can use depressurized from a major high pressure pipeline or transmission line into their generating plant, how do you generate electricity? Major problem.
So the AKK would have solved a big problem in the area of electricity.
It would have solved a problem in the area of electricity for the North Central and some parts of the Northwest. So if you look at the power holding companies in Abuja, AADC, and the ones in Kaduna and in Kano, and maybe some other surrounding states like Jigawa, it would have helped to solve the problems for generating electricity in those places. Because you have, I wouldn't say it will solve it exclusively because beyond power generation from generating companies, there's even a challenge of the fact that not all the power generated is actually transmitted to the discos because of inadequate transmission infrastructure, impairment in discos paying the loans that they owe the generating companies, and then that brings MBET to now provide subsidy. The Nigerian government provides grants and subsidies for discos because they have impairment. They're not able to pay all the monies they owe.
Guarantee for
guarantee for a minimum offtake to the gencos. So those are pertinent issues, but it would have lifted the bar and increased the generating capacity of these companies. Okay? Then you have the problem of the export lines, the lines that go out of Nigeria through pipes. The West African gas pipeline company that goes all the way from Escravos is called the Toki line. Escravos in Delta State goes to Lagos and then goes all the way to Takoradi in Ghana. Is an example of an export line. So the Nigerian government came up with the Nigerian-Morocco gas pipeline, the NGMC, and then the Trans-Sahara, that goes from Niger all the way to Algeria, that will connect an existing line that can take gas to Europe. The reality is this. Gas prices has gone up significantly. Nigeria flares about 700 million metric standard cubic feet of natural gas daily at 178 flaring sites around the country. These oil companies, under what they call the Associated Gas Reinjection Act, apply for flaring permits, and they flare gas and they pay fines for flaring because
for the common man, what is gas flaring?
Gas flaring is like typically a situation where the gas that comes out from the wellheads when you drill crude oil is not trapped
is allowed to escape.
Is allowed to escape.
That is a waste of gas.
That
I want
is
you
a
to
waste
say
of
the
gas.
word waste of.
It's a waste of
gas.
And it's a waste of money, because the 700 million metric standard cubic feet translates to about 14,500 metric tons of liquefied natural gas, LNG, if it's converted to LNG. Yeah? And that LNG basically translates to around $2.2 million daily in revenue for the government if that gas was captured and processed into LNG.
So that would explain the cost of cooking gas and all.
It will explain, and the reason why it will explain in a way is because whenever gas gets either condensates or associated gas, mostly associated gas, gets to a manifold, it can either be processed to compressed natural gas, it can be taken in pipes after it's filtered for pipe natural gas, which is what I've been explaining. It can be converted to liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, that has your aerosol cans, your AC gas. You notice, if Nigerians notice, the cost of AC gas has gone up significantly. Also your cooking gas, okay? Because the propane can be used for either cooking gas or AC gas, okay? And the price of cooking gas has gone up to about 11,000 for 12 kg. Okay, so Nigeria actually imports 60% of the cooking gas it uses, which is the reason why the price has gone up, because of the exchange rate.
What will solve this problem? I'd love to ask you in a bit, but let's bring in callers. It seems like we've just been having this and enjoying this conversation. Let's bring in our callers. And if you have questions or comments to make, join in 09073530044. That is 09073530044 and 09087668888. 09087668888. You can send SMS and WhatsApp messages to 09097054450. That is 09097054450. Don't forget, you can watch us live on YouTube and on Facebook. We're streaming live this morning, as usual. Go there and also leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Now, Kevin, let's talk about, the new alliances, the BRICS. How does this? Should Nigeria position itself to join the BRICS nations? I saw yesterday, also a list of nations that are expected to join. That new alliance that's been formed by China and Russia, as well as Saudi Arabia, South Africa, and the likes. Where is Nigeria in all of this when countries are forming new alliances that would naturally benefit them? We're seeing this situation where it seems like the petrodollar economy would, take a dive in the next few months. How do we position ourselves to not lose out in all of this?
So, it's interesting conversation, because since 2004, when the BRICS was coined by Jim O'Neill, the former chief economist of Goldman Sachs, the BRICS has gone up to control 31% of global trade. It has 31% of global GDP. 5 countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. China alone has 25% of that 31%, if I'm not mistaken, or 23%, if I'm not mistaken. So the issues for the BRICS and Nigeria joining, what are the advantages? The advantages is, number one, it's going to get favorable bilateral loans from the members of the BRICS. Number one. Number two, it's going to join the SDR basket of the Asian Investment and Infrastructure Bank, the AIIB, which is the equivalent of what the BRICS created to rival the IMF and the World Bank, right? Number two, it's going to get long-term forward contracts with members of the BRICS like Brazil, like India, and like China. China recently signed a 30-year forward contract with Qatar for the supply of LNG because it wants to hedge its bets, doesn't want to rely exclusively on Russia, even if Russia can provide it with all the gas it needs. And to a point I like making, one major advantage of joining the BRICS is that Nigeria will be able to consummate its Naira Yuan swap deal. a deal that was created in 2018 to enable Nigerians who trade with China. 26% of all Nigeria's international trade is with China, by the way. A little more than a quarter of all our trade internationally is with China. So the Naira Yuan swap failed because, number one, you can't find the forward curve for the Naira. The Naira fluctuates too much. Between 2019 and 2023, it's gone from 365 to 740.
Okay, can we please hold that thought? Let's bring in this caller quickly. Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Hello, good morning. Good morning.
Yes, my prince.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Ike calling you from Suleja.
Ike, good to have you join us. Go ahead, let's hear you.
Yes, and thank you, and thank you, the guest. I really was educated this morning. But my take in this is I just pray that God will give us a good leader, a visionary leader. That's the only thing I can say now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ike. Appreciate you, showing, contributing to the conversation. Now, giving us a good leader. Well, we've gone to the polls and we've made our choice, right? And some people would say, well, a choice has been made, whether we like it or not, somehow. Hello, good morning.
Yes, good morning, my prince. I keep all the good work, sir.
Good morning, Taking me. Good to have
you. Yes, and good morning to your guest. Yes, my name is Kundu Taking me, all the way from Nasarawa State, New Yanya. Yes, my prince. If we're talking about the economy, you see the issue of economy. If we don't solve security issues, my prince, our economy can never grow, and that is why I was setting the agenda for the incoming government. The last time you give us the opportunity. And one thing I hammered upon was that the incoming government should talk about infrastructure. They should fight insecurity. You know that once we defeat insecurity, a lot of things will fall in good places, my prince.
Okay.
We are able to defeat the bad boys, my prince. A lot of good things will happen because the insecurity is affecting all the economy. Talk about farming. Talk about everywhere. Everybody is affected, my prince. So one thing the government must do is to fight insecurity before we talk about growing the economy. And if we don't defeat the insecurity, the investors, they will not come, my prince. They will never come. Okay. How can you carry your money and invest in a country where you'll be kidnapped, where you are not safe, where you cannot even move freely? Okay, the last time that workers, in the aviation sector, went on a strike, people, were stranded because a lot of people are afraid to travel, on the road. Because when you want to travel by road, your heart will be in your mouth. You don't know what will happen next. So a lot of people, they were just there, stranded, waiting for the strike to be over because you don't know when and where you could be kidnapped. So they.
Taking Bay, we get you on that. Thank you very much. Let's quickly respond to Taking Bay before we get back to what we're talking about. Now, insecurity, where does this leave us with the level of insecurity? He mentioned the fact that foreign investors may not be willing to invest in this country, especially because of insecurity. What do you make of that?
It's interesting because in addressing these issues of insecurity, I've watched governments always cut the tree from the branches instead of taking from the roots. And what do I mean? Look at the issues in the Northeast. Look at the movement for the emancipation of Niger Delta, the movement for the sovereign state of Biafra, Masob. In the Southeast, the IPOB, the Oduduwa Nation. There is a common thread in these agitations. They believe they've been neglected by the government. The militants in Niger Delta are asking for fair representation and resource control. The Southeast is saying that they've been ignored, and you cannot dispute what they are saying because in 10 years from 2009 to 2019, reports found out that Akwa Ibom only as a state alone generated 2.7 trillion from the federal government in allocations. The Southeast entirely as a region, 5 states, generated 2.3 trillion. So you can't argue that there's been an issue with lack of, fairness in sharing of resources. What was the solution? If you look at the Northeast, what are the boys claiming? There is high unemployment, high illiteracy rate. There are states in the Northeast and Northwest that has an 88% illiteracy rate. There are no jobs. What do you want them to do? I'm not justifying what they are doing, but look, when you fail for providing jobs and sound education, what happens is you create a black market for people to do anything to survive. Okay? What's the solution to the problem? Yeah, natural. Change the structure of allocation of resources in Nigeria. There are 5 principles that controls the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Allocation Commission: equity of state, landmass, population, derivation, and IGR. And funds are allocated by the government based on these 5 principles, which is the reason why you have a census coming up by National Population Commission, NPC.
We should have touched on that. But I want us to wrap up on this in 1 minute. The president-elect is one person who, prior to this time, had been big on restructuring. You know, do you think he's going to have what it takes to restructure this country economically?
Well, I've learned not to be optimistic about elected officials in government in Nigeria because of precedents, what has happened in the past. I hope he can.
It's a good place to leave the conversation this morning. Kevin Emmanuel, CEO Dairy Hills, always a pleasure talking with you and always an interesting conversation. I'm glad my listeners said they learned something. It's quite educational and informative. Thank you so much for being on the show. We'll talk some more some other time when we're able to drag you in. Oh my God, the man has turned to gold now. It's hard to find. Thank you so much for joining in this morning.
Thank you.
And to everyone who's been a part of the conversation, I say a big thank you. Business News is up next. Right after that, it will be time for the Midday Crew to take over. My name is Ihiana Prince. I'd love to say thank you again. Let's do this again tomorrow at the top of the hour 9. Keep it with us.